All right, people, we are going to move really fast through section 2.
Sounds good to me.
Yes. We're going to spend most of our time talking about the political challenges of the Gilded Age and not so much about the economic challenges. And not because they aren't important, but because in this section, it's actually talking about the idea of money, like what money is backed by. That makes my head hurt. So you'll see when we get to it. So we're going to talk much more specifically about the political challenges. In this chapter, we have our second president die of assassination, and that's what your assignment will be today and tomorrow, looking at the assassin. Yes, ma'am. They're in the blue box, sweetie, over there. The assassination of President Garfield, and followed very closely by the assassination of President McKinley. And all of those are going to happen as a result of political machines, in that people worked hard to elect these presidents and they felt like they deserved something in response. And from these two gentlemen that assassinated these presidents, they were jobs, and they were jobs in the government, and specifically jobs in the government that they were definitely not qualified to hold. Both of those assassinations were up close and personal. President Garfield is killed as he is standing on a train platform, getting ready to go on a train. Somebody walks up with a very small caliber gun, shoots him in his stomach. I got in a lot of trouble second hour because I referred to President Garfield as obese and then said his weight, which evidently is not. So I'm not going to say it. He was a man with a very large stomach. And the problem when you have a small caliber gun with someone with a large stomach is that the bullet, once it gets inside, it doesn't move around much. And what you're going to read as a part of our assignment is really what caused the death of President Garfield. Was it the assassination's bullet, or was it this horrific medical treatment that he gets as a result of? And at the end of the reading, I think the whole point of it is if I remember correctly, is that these physicians present a bill to Congress to be paid, and then thus Congress debates, like, you guys cause more harm than this small caliber bullet. And then our next assassination is going to be President McKinley, and he too is assassinated with a small caliber gun that the assassin holds in his hand. He's going to wrap his hand up with a handkerchief, and he is in line at the World's Fair as a meet and greet, a handshake, and walks up to shake the hands of President McKinley and shoots him as well. So these two assassinations both have the idea of this corruption and the idea of having a spoil system. So that is one of our vocabulary words, a system in which politicians award government jobs to loyal parties, most important, with little regard to their qualification. So if you all in this room help me become the governor of Indiana, the expectation is that I give you something in return. That I make Haley chief of police of Indianapolis. That I make Preston the, what could I make Preston do? Dog catcher of Sullivan, Indiana. Without any regard to the qualifying things for that job. So that is a problem. And both of those assassins, the assassin of Garfield and the assassin of McKinley, are both doing that because they worked to get the president elected and they had the expectation that they would have a job. Our next important part is civil service, is a system that includes federal jobs and the executive branch. Is there anybody in here who has parent, grandparent, any family member that either works for the post office or federal prison in Terre Haute? Do we have any federal prison people? Trying to think what else. Anybody that works at Crane Naval Station? Anybody have? Do you have somebody where?
No, my grandpa.
Okay, so your grandpa. So your grandpa is part of civil service, And if you really want to impress them, you can kind of say, hey, hey, grandpa, hey, gramps, what's your civil service? Hey, grandpa, what's for supper? Ask him what his GS rating is, his government, and then it'll be a GS and then a number. And the significance of this civil service, the Pendleton Civil Service Act, is an exam. So in order for Preston's grandpa to get that job at the federal prison, or anybody that wants to work at the federal prison, you have to pass a test. And in order to advance in that federal prison system, to move up, which means higher pay, more substantial job description, you have to pass a test. So if any of you have any aspirations of working for the government, you want to be in the FBI, you want to work in the State Department, you want to work in any kind of government facility, you want to be in the military. If you're in the military, the only way that you pass rank is to pass a test. And it's a test that's given to everyone. That is why, my friends, taking tests does not stop at high school. Almost everything you are going to have to do requires a test. Okay? And then the gold standard, that's the one I don't like talking about. So, balance of power creates a stalemate. One of the things that is both positive and negative about the federal government is the same thing. When we have one party that has too much power, that tends to be a bad thing. Or when we have the balance of power weighted equally, it is difficult to get things done because most things in Congress have to pass by a 2/3 majority. And if you're split 50-50, it's really hard to get a 2/3 majority. The other problem that's happening is that party flip-flops. There is not a political party that holds office for a long period of time. So every 2 years, we're cycling out Republicans, Democrats, Republicans, Democrats. And it makes for a very chaotic government. Now, it makes for chaos for the people because nothing gets done. No bills get passed, no laws get enacted. But for the people that are working in there, those government officials, those senators, it works great for you. It works really well for you because the president is weak and you are ripe for corruption. Because the only way people are going to get people to change their votes is through bribery. So, presidents, this time period of the Gilded Age is the second group of what I call known name presidents. The first are the 1850 to 1860, and that would be Franklin Pierce, Millard Fillmore, Zachary Taylor, and James Buchanan. Presidents that most people have no idea that guy is the president, especially the ever popular Millard Fillmore. That sounds like somebody off of Looney Tunes and not a president. We're going to have the same thing with the presidents of the Gilded Age that begin with President Hayes, President Harrison, not the one that died from speaking, but the other one, President Arthur, President Garfield. We have my favorite, Grover Cleveland, who also sounds like he should be living on Sesame Street. And again, a whole lot of presidents that have not a lot of power. And as a result, we got one good one, the Grover Cleveland from Sesame Street. He's not really from Sesame Street, but his name sounds like that to me. So, corruption. This is one of the most corrupt time periods in the history of our country. And I'm including today because it's awful. We have gotten rid of many of the systems that allowed that corruption to take place, such as bribery. It is now illegal for House and Senate members to take bribes. You would think that probably should have been from the very beginning, but it was not. And if you're awarding contracts, and let's just reduce the government to the state of Indiana. State of Indiana's Department of Transportation awards contracts, construction contracts for building roads and bridges. And if you're getting those contracts because you're bribing someone to get them, that's corrupt. It's illegal. But the spoils system allows this to happen. So as soon as a government official, a governor, a president is elected, they then filled their they fill those jobs with people who help them. And again, the most important part for the people of the country is many times those people were not qualified for those jobs. And in particular, the very first one I mentioned was chief of police. You kind of need someone in that department to know what they're doing. And again, it is a very powerful system, this spoil system, and it's going to last a long time. And the saying that's attached to that maybe you've heard is, to the victor goes the spoils, meaning when I win, I get to decide everything. And that's what these presidents have been doing. I'm going to decide who I want to be in my cabinet and in all these positions. So, as a result of this, and nothing happening in the country, there is a movement to promote the civil service reform. And again, that's taking a test. Changing it's going to be hard. And what happens is it takes the second death of a president for that to happen. And President James Garfield is going to be assassinated by a man who says the Republican Party owed me a job. I helped to get you elected. You now owe me a job. And because Garfield did not present him with a job, this man felt justified stalking out the president, finding out that he was getting ready to leave on vacation, showing up at the train platform, and shooting the president in the stomach. And again, the idea is the fact that that man felt he was owed something. And when he didn't, felt perfectly fine assassinating a president. And I think, and maybe, again, I might be wrong, after Lincoln, I think many people thought that security around the president got tighter. It did not, because the idea of Lincoln's assassination was by this crackpot that was never going to happen again. And sure enough, we're going to have two in succession before we really start to think about the security of the president. We're going to have lots of other presidents get shot at, not killed, between the time of that and our next assassination, Kennedy. Truman is shot at, Roosevelt is shot at. In my lifetime, Ronald Reagan was shot at, Gerald Ford was shot at. So this is not something that is taken, that is not unusual, but the idea that someone would assassinate a president over a job is somewhat different. So after the assassination of Garfield, Chester Arthur becomes president. And President Arthur says, as respect to a man that lost his life because of a lack of civil service reform, let's sign this bill into law. And in 1883, Arthur signs the law, the Pendleton Civil Service Act. And it's a merit system, which means in order for you to advance in government positions, it's usually three things. You usually have to pass the test. There's usually a time period or a length of service that you must be in that position. And oftentimes there's some sort of education attached to that job. So one, again, of many institutions that require that is post office. So in order to continue to advance in that system, from being a letter carrier to working behind the office to being the postmaster, is passing these tests. The military obviously makes you pass tests in order to add rank, whether you are a civilian or an officer. You got to pass tests. You have to have time in rank. And sometimes, just because, even if you have all that, if they have too many captains at one time, you will pass the test but not advance, which is the worst kind of thing ever. That's like second prize. That's like a runner-up. Like, I've done all the right things, but I still can't advance in my rate or in my duties. So Spoil system is finally removed as a result of this. So our reading today is about, and for tomorrow is about that assassination. All right, our last little look is at these economic issues. And again, economic issues about tariffs and monetary policy. And monetary policy has to do with how do we give value to our money. And I think these money issues probably kind of make more sense to your generation because of the large movement of money via electronic transfer. So very rarely do you guys actually hold on to money. Does anybody have a paycheck that they get? Do you get your paycheck in your hand or do they put it automatically in your bank? Okay, so you guys are still getting paid by your checks. Okay, so the vast majority of Americans have direct deposit. Like I don't see my paycheck from Southwest Sullivan School Corporation. I don't ever see that check. My money goes right into my account. And like many of you, I very rarely do anything with cash, and very seldom do I do anything with a check. I use my ATM card. And I remember in the early 80s, when I was a junior in high school, that all this stuff started happening. Like we were going to be a cashless society, that you would be given this little card. This is like pie in the sky things. Like you would be given this little card on how to get out money. Because if you needed cash, if you did not get it between 8 and 4 when the bank was open, you did not get cash. That was the only way to get cash, was to go to the bank and get it out. There was no tellers, or no ATMs. And I remember that, like, there's no way I would not have money. There's no way I would not have cash. And now I feel completely comfortable going into the Casey's and getting a donut for $1.09 or whatever it is and sticking my little card in there for $1.09. However much donuts are. So money has changed, but what has not changed about money is there has to be a value system attached to it. What gives us the security that that dollar is worth a dollar and that it's always worth a dollar. And so part of that, again, is the way we get money, tariffs, because a government gets money only by taxing things. That's the only way governments get money, is they have to tax something. And at this point, we're taxing imported goods, which is a big deal and a big issue that separates Republicans and Democrats. But lastly, the most important thing is, what is the basis of our currency? And hopefully all of you have heard of Fort Knox. You might not know what it is, but there's a place called Fort Knox. And it's full of what? Anybody know what's in Fort Knox? It's a whole bunch of gold. Not just gold, but a whole bunch of gold. Hence, where we get the terms that maybe your older relative locked up tighter than Fort Knox, because you're not getting in Fort Knox. We also have minting places. If you look on your coins, if you ever have coins, there will be a little D or a little P. D means that coinage was minted in Denver. P is that it's minted in Philadelphia. And if you ever, in your travels, if your families take vacation and you go by either one of those places, it is the most interesting tour ever. They're hard to get into, obviously, because you're going in a place where there's a whole lot of money and you get to watch them make a whole lot of money. But if you are ever in those places, I would highly encourage you to try to get your family to stop and tour those places. People want to use gold. Other people want silver. Back and forth. Ask Mr. Simmons next year if you really want to know about this, okay? I do not like discussing it because it makes my brain go wonky. All right, so your reading is on President Garfield. There is an internet primary source that you will click on to read, and there is worksheets to answer. Ultimately, what you're doing is looking at all those sources and deciding, when those doctors present their bill to Congress, who's responsible for the death of the president? Was it the assassin, or was it those horrible doctors? All right, anybody have questions?